האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov and good evening, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parshas Yitro, and we are going to do Os Chaf Hey, section number 25. Before we begin, we're going to have a few little words of introduction, and then also take a look at a couple of psukim from the Parsha. So, as is very well known, Parshas Yitro includes the Aseres Hadibros, the 10 commandments. And the Zera Shimshon, on his first piece, which is not this section, it's actually section 22, on his first piece discussing the Aseres Hadibros, he makes a very fundamental and important point, which is that Chazal teach us that the luchos were set up in two sets of 5 commandments. In other words, each one of there were 2 tablets, of course, and each one of the tablets had 5 commandments on them. And he says that according to Midrashim and Chazal, the dibros corresponded to each other based on where they were located on the tablet. So therefore, the first commandment corresponded to the first commandment on the second set, which would be number 6. The second commandment, the second one on the first tablet, corresponded to number 7. So he writes words of explanation and commentary on these connections. So our drush, our section here, number 25, as you can see looking at the title, draws a connection between the commandment to keep Shabbos and the commandment, which is number 4, and commandment number 9, which is not to bear false testimony. So we're going to look at one pasuk from each of those mitzvos, and then we're going to begin the words of the Zera Shimshon. This is Perek Chaf, pasuk Ches. Zochor es Yom HaShabbos likadsho. Remember the day of Shabbos to sanctify it. Then the Torah has a few more psukim talking about Shabbos, and then it goes on with the other mitzvos, number 5, number 6, number 7, number 8, and then in pasuk Chaf, Perek Chaf, pasuk Yud Gimel, just a few psukim later, the Torah says, Lo sa'aneh v're'acha eid shaker. Do not bear false witness against your fellow. So the 2 mitzvos that the Zera Shimshon is going to be talking about and connecting are the mitzvah of remembering the Shabbos and the mitzvah of not speaking falsely and not bearing false testimony. Let's get right into the piece, section Chaf Hey, number 25. Zochor lo sa'aneh. Again, the Zera Shimshon assumes you understand. He's making a connection between the 4th commandment of remembering the Shabbos and keeping the Shabbos and the 9th commandment of not bearing false testimony. So he gets right into his connections. HaShabbos hi os bein HaKodesh Baruch Hu uvein Yisrael. Shabbos is a symbol between Hashem and between the Jewish people. Shabbos is called an os, a sign and a symbol of the relationship of Hashem and the Jewish people. And when we keep Shabbos, we are testifying to that relationship. Ushe'eris Yisrael lo yedabru chazov. And we have a pasuk which teaches us, a pasuk in Sephania, that the remnant of the Jewish people will not speak falsely. So the first connection that the Zera Shimshon is making is that on Shabbos, when we keep Shabbos, when we make Kiddush, we're testifying to the fact that we have a special relationship, that there is a special relationship between Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the Jewish people. And we are also, because we're testifying to that, we have to be very careful whenever we give testimony to do so in a truthful way and never to give false testimony and never to speak falsely. So that's the first connection. Now he goes to the second connection. V'hashabbos hi zecher levriyas ha'olam shenivra b'ma'amar. Shabbos is a remembrance of the creation of the world, which was created through Hashem's speech. Umi shemidaber sheker pogem b'mamar piv. And someone who speaks falsely is tarnishing and validating the words of his mouth. So we see another connection here between Shabbos and not giving false testimony, because keeping Shabbos reminds us of the creation of the world, and the world was created through ma'amar, through Hashem's speech. So there's a connection. And if we speak falsely, chas v'sholem, or if we testify falsely, certainly, then we are doing damage to the words that we speak, whereas we should learn from Hashem's speech, of the power of Hashem's speech and the sanctity of speech. We should learn to only speak the truth. Continuing, another connection, V'ha'emes mekayem ha'olam. Truth is one of the things that sustains the world. That's based, as you can see in the parentheses, on a famous comment in Pirkei Avos and the Mishnah in Avos, that emes is one of the things that sustains the world. V'hasheker mechalehu, and falsehood destroys the world. So again, we have a connection between the importance of speaking only the truth and sustaining the world that Hashem created, and that Shabbos reminds us of that Brias Olam, of that creation, and not speaking falsely, which destroys the world that Hashem created. Continuing to the next paragraph, Ve'od, and another connection. HaShabbos tzorich lekadsho b'divrei Torah. Shabbos needs to be sanctified with the study of Torah. It's not just sufficient to have beautiful meals and to go to shul and to rest and to relax. All of those things are important, but we should also set aside time to study Torah on Shabbos. Umi she'omer sheker v'loshen hara mai takante. Someone who does make the mistake and transgresses and speaks falsely and spreads false gossip about someone, how can he repair from this avera? Yasok baTorah, as Chazal teach us in Arachin, he should involve himself in the study of Torah. So we see another connection here. Shabbos, we should study Torah on Shabbos. There's a special inyan, a special aspect of Shabbos to study Torah on that day. And in addition, the study of Torah can help repair the avera that a person does when he or she speaks falsely and speaks lashon hara, speaks gossip about another person. And continuing with that idea, the Zera Shimshon quotes a pasuk, Zos Toras HaMitzora, in the laws of tsaras, of the skin disease called tsaras, the Torah says this is the law of the mitzora, of the person with tsaras. And the Zera Shimshon brings down, what does mitzora refer to? Hamotzi shem ra. The word mitzora, the very word mitzora, which refers to a person who has tsaras, the skin disease of tsaras, can be broken up to spell out hamotzi shem ra, to refer to someone who spreads a bad gossip or a bad report, an evil report about another person. And then the Zera Shimshon quotes a final pasuk to show this connection between studying Torah and Shabbos and speaking and not speaking falsely. This is a pasuk in Mishlei, Marpe Loshon Eitz Chaim. The thing that heals the tongue is a tree of life, meaning Eitz Chaim, of course, is a reference to the Torah, and so studying Torah can heal the tongue. Again, if a person speaks lashon hara, or a person wants to protect himself or herself from speaking lashon hara, Eitz Chaim, they should hold on and study the tree of life. They should study the Torah. So in this paragraph, the Zera Shimshon has shown a strong connection from several different sources between the study of Torah, which is important both on Shabbos and as a way to repair the sin of lashon hara. Continuing, V'hiksha ha'Ion Yaakov Reish Masechah Shvuos. The commentary of the Ion Yaakov asks a question in the beginning of the tractate of Shavuos. Diloma b'dibros acharonos ksiv ka'asher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha. Why is it that only in the second set of luchos, and we see the wording of the second set of luchos in Parshas Va'eschanan in Devarim, here in Parshas Yitro, our Parsha, we see the text of the first set of luchos, the Dibros Rishonos, but only in the second set, in the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos, it says, Ka'asher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, you should guard the Shabbos like that which Hashem commanded you. But it doesn't say those words in the first set. V'darshinan minei b'Gemara, and the Gemara in Maseches Shabbos learns out from those words, or explain those words to mean Ka'asher tzivcha, like that which Hashem commanded you, b'mora, in the place of the bitter water, and we'll explain that reference in a moment. V'loma lo ne'amar kain b'dibros harishonos. Why didn't the Torah also say the same words in the first set of luchos, ka'asher tzivcha, the same phrase about like that which Hashem commanded you? V'seretz lefi darko, and the Ion Yaakov has his own answer according to his own approach for Ayin Sham, and you can see there in his commentary to look at it. But let's talk about Mora, the place called Mora, and what happened there, and then let's understand the question that is being posed here, and before we move on to the Zera Shimshon's answer to that question. So the Torah teaches us that after the Bnei Yisrael left Mitzrayim, and after the Yam Suf, the great miracles of the splitting of the sea and the sea crashing down and destroying the Egyptian forces, after that happened, Bnei Yisrael left that area and began to travel in the Midbar, and they traveled for 3 days, and they didn't find water to drink. Then they came to a place called Mara, or they came to a place which ultimately became, they got to receive the name of Mara. And in that place, there was lots of water, but the water was not able to be consumed. The water was too bitter for the people to drink it. So Hashem, the Torah teaches us, Hashem showed Moshe a certain eitz, a certain wood or tree from a certain tree, and Hashem threw and Moshe threw the wood into the water, and this enabled the people, this sweetened the water, enabled the people to be able to drink the water. And there at that place, the Torah tells us that Hashem gave the Jewish people certain commandments. And Chazal teach us that one of those mitzvos was the mitzvah of Shabbos, the commandment of keeping Shabbos. So here the Zera Shimshon is saying that when the Torah teaches about keeping Shabbos here in Parshas Yisro, it doesn't say like that which Hashem previously commanded you. It doesn't say those words, Ka'asher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha. However, if we look much later in the Torah in Parshas Va'eschanan and Sefer Devarim, which Chazal teach us is the text of the Aseres HaDibros, the second luch, as seen in the second luchos, there in the mitzvah of Shabbos, it does say, guard the Shabbos, Ka'asher tzivcha Hashem Elokecha, like that which Hashem commanded you, meaning guard the Shabbos the way that Hashem commanded it when you were at Mara, when you were at this place with the bitter water, before you arrived at Har Sinai to receive the commandment of Shabbos there. So the Zera Shimshon's question is, why would it be that the reference, the words referring to Mara and the commandment of Shabbos that was given to the Jewish people there are not mentioned in the first luchos, but were mentioned in the second luchos? That is the question. Vila Anios Dati, next paragraph. According to the humbleness of my knowledge, the Zera Shimshon says, near it would appear the Davka B'dibros Acharonos Shayach Lomar Ka'asher Tzivcha B'mora. Only in the second set of luchos was it relevant to say the words like that which Hashem commanded you, and the reference to Mora, and the place called Mora, and the commandment of Shabbos that was given there, as we discussed. Masha ein kain b'dibros harishonos, and this is not true when it comes to the first luchos. Vehatam, and the reason for this distinction is Shahare anu yodim, we know shepikuach nefesh docha es haShabbos. We know that one of the very important halachos, laws of Shabbos, is that if a situation arises in which a person's life is in danger, this pushes aside the laws of Shabbos. So if a person, God forbid, has to be rushed to the emergency room on Shabbos, we jump in the car as quickly as possible and we get them there, or we call the ambulance, we do whatever it takes, and we violate whatever laws of Shabbos we need to violate to save the person's life. And we know that this is true from many sources in Chazal. Ucheshenitztavu Yisrael b'mora al haShabbos. And when the Jewish people were given the mitzvah of Shabbos for the first time at Mora, nitztavu al shmiraso, they were commanded to guard and keep the Shabbos. V'nitztavu nami lechalelo, and they were also commanded, they were given this law about pikuach nefesh, which is specifically to lechalelo, to desecrate Shabbos al sakonas nefashos, in a case in which someone's life is in danger. So they received that law about violating Shabbos to save a life when they were given the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos at Mora, at this location, which they reached, as we said, when they, a few days after leaving the Yam Suf, way before they got to Har Sinai. V'shapir muchach nami, and this can also be, this idea can also be clearly established and proven mismichus from the juxtaposition, going to the top of the next column, hapsukim, from the juxtaposition of the following psukim. Shom sam lo chok mishpat. So this first pasuk is coming from the incident at Mara of the bitter water that was sweetened, and it says, Shom, there, some lo, he placed for them, or for it, meaning for the nation, for Bnei Yisrael, chok, a statute, umishpat, and a judgment. That pasuk, according to Chazal, refers to Hashem giving Bnei Yisrael the mitzvah of Shabbos at Mora, as we've described a few moments ago. The hainu mitzvah shenitztavu b'Mora. These words refer to the commandments that were given to the Jewish people at Mora. Usamich le. And next to that pasuk, right after that pasuk, in fact, the pasuk says, "Vayomer im shamoa tishma." And Hashem said, "If you will surely hearken and listen, v'chule, etc., kol hamachala, all of the sickness, v'chule, etc." The Zera Shimshon's leaving out a few words, but the pasuk says, Hashem tells the Jewish people, if you will listen and follow my laws and follow my ways, then all of the illnesses, the sicknesses that I put on the Egyptians, I will not put them on you. I will not strike you with the sicknesses and diseases that I struck the Egyptians with and that the Egyptians suffered from. Klomar. This means to say, in terms of the mitzvah of Shabbos, aval pi shetzivisi eschem ala Shabbos, even though I commanded you about Shabbos, im kol zeh, nonetheless, im yeh b'mkom choli, if there will be a situation of serious illness, yeh mitzvah aleichem lechalolo, then the commandment on you will be to violate Shabbos in order to save life in a case of pikuach nefesh, in a case of a danger to someone's life. So the Zera Shimshon says that not only do we know this from Chazal, but we can see it ourselves in the juxtaposition of two psukim that are written in the incident of Mora, the pasuk about Hashem giving us the mitzvah, which Chazal say was one of the mitzvahs was Shabbos, and the pasuk about Hashem not striking the Jewish people with terrible illnesses and diseases. So if a person is struck with a terrible illness or disease, then they can violate the laws of Shabbos. Omnam, however, Har Sinai, when the Jewish people came to Har Sinai, v'nitztavu b'dibros harishonos al hashavos, and they were commanded in the first set of luchos that Moshe was given at that time, and one of the mitzvos was Shabbos. Lo haveshayich lomar, it would not have been appropriate to say ka'asher tzivcha b'mora, that Hashem was commanding us to keep Shabbos like that which he commanded the Jewish people at Morah. That would not have been an appropriate or accurate phrasing. Because as we've explained, that whole line in connecting Shabbos to Morah brings in, includes, I should say, the teaching that a person should be machalo Shabbos when the person's life is in danger. Shaharei kishekiblu Yisrael es Torah. Behold, when Bnei Yisrael received the Torah, im lo hayu chotim, if they had not sinned, meaning if they had not sinned with the golden calf, with the paraduma, lo hayasholeit bohem, there would have been no power over them, lo yetzer hara, not from the evil inclination, velo chet, and not from sin, velo choli, and not from sickness, velo misa, and not from death. An amazing teaching. If Bnei Yisrael had not sinned with the para aduma, had not sinned with the golden calf after they received the luchos, then the evil inclination and the temptation to sin and sickness and death would have no power over them. Dichsiv, as the pasuk says about the luchos, Horus al haluchos. The words were engraved on the tablets. The Omru Zichrono Livracha, and Chazal said about this word Horus, engraved, Cherus, that the Jewish people would have been freed Mimala Chamaves Umeyetzer Hara V'chule, from the angel of death and from the Yetzer Hara. So the words of the Luchos and the giving of the Luchos to Bnei Yisrael would have freed Bnei Yisrael at that time from Misa and Yetzer Hara and holy and sickness, serious illness. If there's no Yetzer Hara and there's no death, then there also won't be serious illness. Te'ein misa below chet, there is no death without sin. Ve'ein yisurin below avon, and there's no suffering without transgression. That's based on a Gemara Masechah Shabbos. Ve'im kain, if so, lo hayu trichem lachalal haShabbos la'olam. If death and illness were not issues, were not concerns that they had to be worried about, then there never would be a circumstances when the Jewish people, anyone amongst the Jewish people, would need to violate Shabbos for pikuach nefesh, for serious life-threatening illnesses, because there would be no such thing as a serious life-threatening illness. So the whole halacha, the whole law about violating Shabbos in cases of pikuach nefesh would not have been relevant to talk about at the time of the giving of the first luchos. Umishum hachi, and because of this, lo shayach lomar ka'asher tzivcha b'mora. It wouldn't have been appropriate to say in the giving, when the first luchos were given, it wouldn't have been appropriate to say the line ka'asher tzivcha b'mora, like I commanded you at Mara. Because there at Morah, the Jewish people were taught the law that sometimes we need to violate Shabbos to save a person's life. V'chan, and here at the giving of the first luchos, call ikar ein lechalulo. There would be fundamentally no reason to be machalo Shabbos, because the idea of a pikuach nefesh situation would not have come up at that time if the Jewish people had not sinned with the Chet HaEgel. Aval la'achar shechatu, however, after Bnei Yisrael sinned, v'nigzar aleichem choli umisa v'yetzer hara, and then there was decreed on them that sicknesses and death and the Yetzer Hara could have power over them. Huchrach lomar lahem ka'asher tzivcha b'mora. It was necessary, it became necessary to say in the luchos the words like I commanded you at Morah. So the Zera Shimshon is going to continue in his explanation, but let's just pause to understand what he just explained to us. The Zera Shimshon had posed a very important question regarding the distinction, one of the distinctions between the way the words in the appeared on the first luchos, which we see here in Parshas Yitro, and the way they appeared on the second set of luchos, which is presented to us in Parshas Va'eschanon. And he now explained to us that the words Ka'asher Tzivcha B'mora only appear in the second luchos because only when the second luchos were given did the whole idea of and the whole concern about a person being deathly ill or seriously ill and maybe having to violate Shabbos, that's only relevant after the Chet HaEgel, when the second luchos were given. However, when the first luchos were given, there was no need to talk about that type of situation, since had the Bnei Yisrael not sinned with the Egel, that there would have been no such thing as illnesses that might have caused a person to die and would have required that person to violate Shabbos. Continuing, v'cholium misa nigzar aleihem, and illness and death was declared to have power over the Jewish people. Lefi sheheidu sheker b'hakodesh baruch hu. They testified falsely about Hashem. Eila Elohecha Yisrael. When the golden calf was made, some people called out, "This is your God, Israel. This Egel, this golden calf, is your God." And that, of course, was as false a testimony, as false a statement as could possibly be said, to, God forbid, indicate that somehow this graven image was the deity of the Jewish people instead of Hashem. So they testified falsely at that time. V'zehu lo sa'aneh v'reacha. And this is referred to in the words of the 9th commandment: do not bear false testimony against your fellow or against your friend. Dehainu hakodesh baruch hu, because the word v'reacha, you're against your friend, can be a reference, can be understood on a deeper level to be a reference to Hashem. Kemoshe Omru Zichronim Levracha, as Chazal say, based on a pasuk in Mishlei, Al reacha v'rea avicha al ta'azov. Do not forsake your friend and the friend of your father. And Chazal say on that pasuk in Mishlei, that is a reference to Hashem. When it says, don't forsake the friend of your father and of yourself, that's a reference to Hashem. So too here, do not bear false testimony against your friend can also be understood as a reference to Hashem, which is very connected to the subjects that Zera Shimshon has been elucidating, because the Jewish people actually did that with the Chet HaEgel. They actually claimed that this was somehow their divine leader, and this was bearing false testimony against Hashem. And that is one way of understanding that pasuk. The ode, and another point we can make, going back to our connections between Shabbos and not bearing false testimony. The Zera Shimshon is going to bring another connection now. Mikan yotzalonu ktsas remez v'tam. From our whole discussion comes out a certain hint and explanation to the following issue. Lamai disnan reish perek daled didamai, something that was taught in the first Mishnah in the beginning of the 4th chapter of Maseches Demai. V'ayin sham, you can look there, b'perish harav Ovadia mi Bartanura, and the parish of the Bartanura. She'amei ha'arotzos misyorim l'shaker b'Shabbos. The concept that's explained over there is that amei arotzos, people who are generally ignorant of certain aspects of Torah law and don't necessarily therefore keep all aspects of Torah law, they are very careful. They are afraid to tell lies on Shabbos, yoser mi bachol, more than on the weekday. And that the reason it's being discussed over there is because the Mishnah makes a statement that you can't buy certain produce from an Am Haaretz, from a person who might not be fully conversant and careful about all of the laws of the agricultural, how to handle the agricultural produce and the tithing, etc. You shouldn't buy produce from them. However, if you ask them on Shabbos if they tithe and they say yes, if they tithe, in other words, this produce before Shabbos, then you can eat it. You can trust them if they tell you that they did all the things they were supposed to do with this produce. However, if you ask them during the weekday and they say they did it, you can't trust them. The Koshe, Zera Shimshon continues, this is difficult to understand. because there is no other transgression, lo matzinu chiluk zeh, where we find this distinction between weekday and Shabbos. In other words, we never find a case besides this case where of the lying and or versus the truth telling. We don't find other mitzvos where it says you can trust the person to keep that mitzvah on Shabbos, but you can't trust the person to keep that mitzvah during the weekday. We just don't find that. But we do find by telling the truth. And we are forced to say the avera zo, that this avera of lying, chamira tuva be'einehem, is more strict and stringent in their eyes, lavor aleha b'Shabbos, to transgress it on Shabbos. Lefisha keneged zachor, because corresponding to the mitzvah of Shabbos, yesh lo saneh eid shaker. There is the mitzvah of do not bear false testimony against your friend. So the Zera Shimshon is saying, even the Amei Ha'arotzos, even those who are ignorant of certain laws and how best to keep them, were aware of this fundamental connection between the fourth mitzvah of the Aseres HaDibros, the mitzvah of keeping Shabbos, and the ninth mitzvah, the mitzvah of not lying and not bearing false testimony. And therefore, they were scrupulous about only telling the truth on Shabbos, and the halacha therefore taught us that you could trust their statements about their produce and how they handled their produce in terms of the mitzvos they needed to do with the produce to make it permissible to eat. You could trust them if they talked about it on Shabbos, but you couldn't trust them necessarily if they said they did what they were supposed to do on a weekday. So the Zera Shimshon has shown us here in this piece many interesting and fascinating and important connections between Shabbos, the fourth mitzvah in the Aseres HaDibros, and not giving false testimony and speaking dishonestly and falsely, the ninth mitzvah of the Aseres HaDibros. Yasher Koch for joining us on this week's Parsha. We look forward to learning next week's Parsha in the Zera Shimshon again next week.